Hello students and welcome in the online session of class 8th science chapter 12 friction. This is the first video of this lesson. So let us see what are the topics to be covered today. So first of all we will learn about what is friction, what are the different factors which affect friction, the causes of friction as an evil and a important thing for us, then how friction can be reduced or how it can be increased. So these are some of the topics which will be covered today. So let's start with the first slide about friction. Now here in the slide you can see different types of pictures here, right? So in the first picture you can see that an arrow is towards the left side and is written the pushing force. That means the force is applied towards the left direction, and here you can see that the friction is acting towards the right direction. So from the image here it is very clear that friction is something or the force which is acting against the applied force. If the force applied is in left direction, so friction will be applied in the right direction. That means the applied force and friction are opposite to each other. Okay, so from this diagram it is very clear. From the second diagram also you can see that the force applied is in right direction. So naturally motion will also be in right direction, but friction is acting between the two surfaces, the surface of the ground and the surface of the box. And you can see that the direction of this friction is towards the left side against the applied force. Okay, so friction is acting between the two surfaces. Okay, so friction is the rubbing, okay, or the coming contact of the two surfaces. Because of the when the two surfaces come in contact with each other, there is always a friction or rubbing against their surfaces, and which give rise to the frictional force. Now in the third image also you can see that a person is pulling the box towards it himself, and so the motion of the box towards will be towards the person itself, and you can see that the friction is towards the right side, means opposite to the direction of the applied force. Okay, and here you can see that this is surface number 1 and this is surface number 2. So the two surfaces in contact with each other, they get blocked with each other. Their irregularities get blocked amongst each other, which give rise to friction. When the two surfaces in contact, if their irregularities get blocked amongst each other, so due to which there is an interlocking between the two surfaces, which give rise to friction, which give rise to rubbing, and the force which is produced because of this rubbing, because of this interlocking, is nothing but the frictional force, and this frictional force is always acting in opposite direction to the applied force. Now let's move on to the next slide and see what is friction. So friction opposes the relative motion. First thing, that friction opposes the motion between the two surfaces in contact. So friction is a type of contact force. If friction has to be occurred, the two surfaces must be in contact with each other. Okay, and friction acts on both the surfaces. Friction will act on both the surfaces which are in contact with each other, or the two surfaces which are rubbing against each other. So the opposing force which acts in the opposite direction of the movement of the upper body is called as frictional force. So upper body means, suppose the box is on the ground, so box is the upper body. If we are walking on the ground, so we are the upper body. So the movement of the upper body is possible. Okay, ground will not move. So friction will always act in the opposite direction to the movement of the upper body. If suppose the upper body is moving in right direction, so the friction will be acting in left direction, as you can see in the diagram also. Fine, so there is a box here which is just rolling on this surface, and the direction of motion is towards right side, and here you can see that friction is acting towards the left side. Fine, so I think these points are very clear regarding friction. Now next is what are the different factors which affect friction. So friction depends on the nature of the surface in contact. Okay, this is very important. You must have to keep it in mind that friction depends on the nature of the surface, as we have discussed that two surfaces whenever are in contact with each other, frictional force acts between them. So two surfaces are in contact. So what is the nature of those surfaces? That will decide the friction, whether the friction will be more or whether the friction will be less. So friction depend on the nature of the surfaces, what type of surface is used in the given case. Then next one is, for a given pair of surfaces, friction depends upon the state of smoothness or roughness of those surfaces. Fine. So when we say nature of the surface, then friction depends on whether the surface is smooth surface or rough surface. If there is rough surface, the friction will be more, because in case of rough surface, if the surface is more rough, then what will happen? There will be more interlocking. There will be more interlocking. Now with the blue color I am showing surface 1 and with the red color I am showing surface 2. You can see here that if the surface is rough or if there are more irregularities, they get blocked among each other. So there is interblocking. Okay, and if this interblocking has to be removed, more force have to be applied. So frictional force will be more in case of rough surface and it is less for smooth surfaces. So remember children, for smooth surface the friction is always very less and for rough surface the friction is more. Now friction is independent of the area of contact. This is also very important point, that friction does not depend on the area of contact. Fine. Whether more area is in contact with each other or whether large area is in contact with each other, friction will not depend on it. Friction will only depend on the nature of the surface. Fine. It does not depend on the area of the contact. Whether 1 centimeter area is in contact or 1 meter is in contact with the ground or whether 1 kilometer area is in contact, that does not matters. Friction only and only depend on the nature of the surface, whether the surface is rough or whether the surface is smooth. Then friction depends on how hard the two surfaces pressed together. Means how hard or how much is the interlocking between the two surfaces. If the interlocking is more, if the two surfaces are hardly pressed against each other, means hardly pressed means there is more interlocking, then friction will be definitely more. So now you can see here that the surface is smooth surface here, so a person is pushing it, so small push is only needed. Why small push is needed? Because there is smooth surface. Smooth surface there, that means less interlocking. Fine, less interlocking, that means low friction. And if the friction is less, then with the less force only the box can be moved easily. Now if the surface is more, then there will be more interlocking, there will be high friction, and to overcome this friction more force has to be applied so that the box can move. So a big push is needed here. Okay, I hope these concepts are clear. Now next is, what are the different causes of friction? What causes the friction to happen? So the first thing is the surface irregularities. Fine. You can see here black color is for surface 1 and brown color shows surface 2. So now you can see here the interlocking between the two surfaces, the irregularities get blocked. So friction is caused due to the surface irregularities, because the surface is irregular and those irregularities get in contact with each other, they get blocked amongst each other and it gives rise to friction. Then adhesive forces between the surface in contact. There is an adhesive force. Adhesive force means attractive forces between the two surfaces. So you can say that irregularities is one of the reason, and second is the attraction forces between the two surfaces, which also give rise to friction. Now the next is friction as evil and must for us. Friction is an evil. Friction is not very good, but it is must for us also. Means friction is a good evil. Friction is not good for us, but it is very very necessary for us also. So it means we have some benefits of friction as well as there are some disadvantages of friction also. So let us discuss about both the sides of the coin. So the first one is, Friction produces heat when we vigorously rub our palms together for a few minutes. Right? So friction is what? Rubbing. So if you rub the two palms of your hands, you will see that both the palms get hot. So heat is generated due to rubbing of the two palms. Right? So this is good for us because it increases the blood circulation. The next is friction is responsible for wear and tear of various parts of the machines. If the machine parts are rubbing against each other, then they will get wear and tear. Wear and tear means they will be damaged. So friction is not good for the machines. Okay, so it's an evil. Then friction decreases the efficiency of the machines. If the two parts of the machines are rubbing against each other, they will damage, and the machine efficiency of the machine will also decrease. Machine will not work for a long time. Okay, so friction here is an evil. Then friction is responsible for writing, walking, and transmitting energy. Right, this is a benefit for friction, that friction helps in writing. Okay, when we are writing on the with the help of pen on the paper, then only because of friction it is possible that we write easily. If there is not friction, what will happen? Our hand will slip on the page and we will not be able to write, we will not be able to hold the pen also. So while walking, while writing, friction is very very important for us. Then friction is responsible for starting or stopping. If we want to start from a rest position, that is also possible because of friction. If we want to stop, if someone is moving and someone wants to stop, then also friction plays a very important role. So walking, stopping, starting any movement, that all depends on friction. Friction is used in gripping or holding an object with our hands. We are able to grip something, we are able to hold the objects in our hands only because of friction. So friction is a benefit for us. So at some places it is a disadvantage for us, at some places it is a benefit for us, right? So we can say that friction is an evil as well as very necessary for us, right? So here you can see in the diagram there are some benefits of friction. So first one, you can see that striking a matchbox. If we have to start fire using a matchstick, then we have to strike the matchstick against the matchbox. So what is happening there? We are rubbing the matchstick against the matchbox. So that is, rubbing is what? Rubbing is friction. So that is one of the benefit of friction, that a fire can be caused or can be started with the help of matchstick, with the help of friction. Then second, you can see here spiked shoes of cricket players. These are the shoes of the cricket players from the lower side. So they have spikes in it. So these spikes give a grip on the ground and the players will not slip on the ground. So this is also one of the benefit of friction. Then we are able to drive the automobiles. Vehicles can be driven easily on the road only because of friction. Okay, brakes can be applied. So when brakes are applied, the two surfaces get rubbed against each other hardly and the friction increases, and because of that the vehicle stops. Okay, then writing on paper. So holding the pen in the hand, then writing on the paper, grip, getting a grip in the hands is all because of friction only. If there is more smoothness, then what will happen? We will not be able to hold the objects clearly and we are not able to write on the paper. So these are some of the benefits. Now let us discuss the disadvantages. So you can see here that on the slippery surface, the vehicles cannot be driven, or we cannot walk easily on the slippery surfaces because of friction, because the friction is less. Okay, less friction is also harmful, so we slip down. Okay, now here you can see forest fires are caused. Now forest fires are caused because of friction, right? Like once the due to the more increase in the temperature, if one of the dry leaf get caught the fire, then the whole forest get damaged because of these forest fires. So this is all friction, rubbing against each other. Okay, fire also get rubs against each other, things get rubbed against each other and the fire is caused. Then noise pollution is caused because of friction, right? When the aeroplanes start flying, they first run very speedily on the roads, right? This is what, now this is when the tires are pressed hardly on the road, so that causes noise pollution also. Okay, so friction can cause noise pollution as well. So these are some of the disadvantages of the friction. So friction is evil for us also, but it is a very essential. You can see simply friction is a very essential evil for us, right? It has benefits as well as disadvantages also. Now let's see how friction can be reduced or increased. If we want to increase the friction, then how, and if we want to decrease the friction, then how it is possible. So let us first see friction can be reduced, how it can be reduced. If the friction is more and we want to reduce it, then we can use grease, oil, powder, ball bearings, cushions of dry air between the moving surfaces. Like suppose here you can see this is the tire of a cycle. So what is happening here? We are applying lubricants. Okay, greasing has been done in between the chains and between the tires, to reduce the friction. If the friction is more, then what will happen? You have to apply more force on it, and then also the cycle will not move. But if we use grease, oil or lubricants in between the tires, then it will reduce friction. It reduces the rubbing of the parts of the bicycle, and the bicycle can easily move. You can see in the doors and in the doors of the houses or in any of the buildings, oil can be applied in the hinges, in the screws. So what will happen? By applying the oil, it will lubricate the screws and friction will be reduced. Rubbing of the screws against the doors, against the walls will reduce, and the noise coming through the doors can also be stopped using or applying the oil. Then you can see here polished surface of the slides. When it is polished, so what will happen? Friction is reduced here. Okay, friction is reduced and the person can easily slide down through the slides. So here it is a benefit that we are reducing the friction with the help of polishing the surfaces. Then you can see here that the luggage which we use for our tours and travels. So these luggage nowadays have wheels, small wheels present on the lower sides, whether it's a bag or a briefcase. So they have small tires. So what happens? These tires will help in carrying very heavy weights also, because rolling rolling reduces the friction. Rolling with the help of the wheels reduces the friction. So wheels also helps in reducing friction, right? Then friction can be increased. How friction can be increased? So if we have to increase the friction, we have to increase the roughness, because rough surface has more friction. Okay, we were here applying grease and oil because these are very smooth things, and smoothness reduces the friction. And now when we have to increase the friction, we have to make the surface rough. So you can see here a tire is shown. So there are some designs made on the tires. Why these designs are made? Now these designs make the surface rough, and because of the rough surface, these tires can hold, or they can have grip on the surface, and the vehicle will not slip down. Then you can see here football shoes. They also have designs made on the lower side to increase the friction, because the surface will become rough and the friction will increase. Okay, then you can see here the sole of the shoes, sole of your sleepers, they all have designs made on the lower side, and this is the reason to increase the friction. Roughness of the surface will increase the friction. Okay. Now kabaddi players, they wipe hands with sand. Okay, here you can see that kabaddi players, because they have to hold a person, so before playing they use, or they apply sand on their hands, because sweating reduces the friction, and then it is unable to hold a person. So when they apply sand on their hands, so what will happen? Sand is generally rough in surface, so that will increase the friction. Because of that, the kabaddi players can easily hold the person's hand or legs, right? So these are the different ways. Like if we have to reduce the friction, we have to use smooth surfaces, like when we are playing carom. Okay, so when we have to move the striker, and if it is not moving easily, then we generally sprinkle powder on the carom board. So that what the powder will do? Powder will reduce the friction, and then the strikers can easily slide over the powder, and friction can be reduced on the surface. Now next is, we have come to the summary point now. So we have learned about friction today. What is friction? So friction is the force which is acting between the two surfaces that are rubbing against each other. Friction always is in opposite direction of motion. Friction is an evil, necessary evil for us. So Friction can be reduced by applying oil, grease, okay, powder, right, and it can be increased also by making the surface rough. So we have discussed also about the different factors which affect the friction and what are the different causes of the friction also. So I hope these many points are clear to each and every student. You just read the lesson also from your textbook so that more the concepts will be clear to you, and we'll meet in the next session with the next topic. Okay, till then all of you stay home and stay safe.